Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today's interview is with Firelli Alonso. Former Senior Director of External Manufacturing at Pfizer, Fi brings over 2 decades of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, starting with a PhD in molecular virology. Over the years, Fi has spearheaded viral vaccine development and headed Pfizer's pre-commercial outsourcing group focused on biologics. In this episode, she shares invaluable insights on how to select and manage contract development and manufacturing organisations, with a particular focus on quality and what you can learn from in-person site visits. And we also find time to talk about her other passion, orchids. I hope you enjoy the interview. So I'm joined on the podcast today by Firelli Alonso, who is founder and consultant of Consult Fi Biologics, but also has over 20 years of experience, much of that at Pfizer, where you were Senior Director of External Manufacturing. Welcome, Fi. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Luke.
It'd be great to start off, I think, by talking about some of your experience and what's brought you to where you are today, please.
Yes. So I started off working at Wyeth Pharmaceuticals in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
So there, I'm a virologist. My PhD is in virology, molecular virology. So I was hired to lead the Department of Viral Vaccine Development at that time at Wyeth. So for the last 8 years, I was there doing viral vaccine development work and manufacturing. And that's where I also incorporated my knowledge of cGMP manufacture and testing. And then Wyeth was acquired by Pfizer in 2009. And since then, I have been involved and headed the outsourcing group for Pfizer, specifically the pre-commercial outsourcing group. So Pfizer, being such a big company, splits up outsourcing between pre-commercial and commercial. Really, my focus when I was at Pfizer since, like I said, 2009 was the acquisition until I retired the end of 2023 was on outsourcing of biologics mainly.
And so what type of biological products were there that you were working across?
Oh, many types, including monoclonal antibodies, bispecific antibodies, and recombinant proteins, vaccines, both bacterial and viral vaccines, and then antibody-drug conjugates, which Pfizer had worked for a while since when they acquired Wyeth in 2009, carried over that antibody-drug conjugate pipeline through 2018, and then somehow decision was made to stop the pipeline.
Okay.
And then 2023, last year, Pfizer decided, let's acquire Seattle Genetics or Seagen, which was a huge, their main focus is ADCs. So that revived ADCs, and it's been hot in the industry right now and flourishing. Let me put it that way.
Because Mylotarg was the first ADC, which was approved by the FDA, wasn't it? Way back in 2000.
That's correct. That was in 2000, and that was targeted for AML, form of leukemia. And the monoclonal antibody was conjugated to probably the most toxic toxin called calicheamicin, which was also manufactured at Pfizer. So very potent molecule, calicheamicin. So that was the first, was Wyeth. And then from 2000, it took 11 years for the next approval for an antibody-drug conjugate. And that was in 2011 with Adcetris, that's the name, the trade name. And that was by Seattle Genetics collaborating with Takeda. And it was approved for Hodgkin's lymphoma. And through the years, by 2023, or March actually, 2024, there have been 14 approved ADCs and about 150 in the clinic. That's how progressed it has.
And a huge amount of investment right now in the ADC space.
A huge amount. Pfizer's paid $43 billion to acquire Seagen. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Why is the space so hot at the moment?
I believe it's because ADCs are, effective, right? They're targeted products. It's a composite of a monoclonal antibody attached to a payload. We call it a payload. It's actually a toxin with different modes of action. It could be something that would just affect DNA replication, for instance, of a cancer cell. So the good news is it's targeted. It can find a cancer cell, home in to a cancer cell, and then inside the cancer cell release this toxin and then kill only cancer cells. So overall, the quality of life of patients who have been provided ADCs is much better, for example, compared to chemotherapy. You know, you have the hair loss, you're weak, your immune system is out. I mean, there's just too many adverse effects. So ADCs, on the other hand, you don't have those. However, the challenge for ADC really is that linker that hooks up the payload to the antibody. That linker has to be stable up to the point that ADC enters a cancer cell. Because if it's not stable and it's released before it can, then you're killing normal cells, right? And there has been a vast improvement in that linker. And that's probably why you see more ADCs being approved now. And you're having to be able to increase what's called the therapeutic dose of an ADC. And yeah, it's working very well. And I believe Pfizer's Padcev, I think it was. Well, it was Seattle Genetics, was approved recently, last year, I think.
There's an increasing number of CDMOs who can support developing these treatments, of course.
Yes, but very challenging, right? The manufacture is very challenging.
Yes.
For these CDMOs because they have to have what's called an OEB5 level facility because the toxin is so poisonous, basically, it's toxic. They have to work under OEB5 conditions and they have to be certified. So you can't just, they have, I forget the name. Oh, SafeBridge is one company that certifies for the manufacture of ADCs in a toxic environment. So it's less toxic once it's already in the drug product. Well, it's toxic at the beginning when it's pure, right? Obviously, and then as you conjugate it to the antibody, then it's still toxic, but not as at the beginning when you're actually preparing the toxin itself, the payload. So you need facilities all the way from drug substance to drug product. To be OEB5 capable.
Roughly, how many of them are there, would you say that you're familiar with?
Oh, that's a good question, Luke. I don't know, but when we started outsourcing for ADC manufacture, I would say you can count with my two hands how many there were. And at that time, so that was in the early 2010, the CDMO, CMOs were focused either only on drug substance or focused only on drug product. So here, drug substance is really the antibody plus the linker plus the toxin, right? That's called the drug substance. So there was a problem with that being separate facilities. And sometimes we had to outsource drug substance manufacture in the US and then send it to, let's just say, Switzerland for drug product fill finish. Shipping is always a problem anywhere. I mean, even here in Georgia, we have problems shipping because the post office here has, okay, I'm not going to go there. But shipping has always been a problem. And yeah, so at that time in the early 2010s, I used to speak at conferences and I used to keep on telling CDMOs, please try to go where you can do what's called a one-stop shop. You know, everything occurs in your facility. That way you make the conjugate, you just wheel it into your fill finish and get it done. No shipment in between. So I started off one time, I had a presentation where I had like a very complex web, the drug substance, the drug product, antibody manufacture, linker manufacture, payload. That is so complicated. And imagine setting up contracts for like 6 CMOs.
Yeah.
That was a doozy. So I guess they listened. So now I'm seeing more and more CMOs that have both drug substance and drug product capability. Some of them even can manufacture the payload itself and the linker itself. So truly integrated, right? Integrated is the key. Make it better for the client. I don't have to think about setting up quality agreements and contracts. Because at that period that I was doing outsourcing of ADCs, my group was responsible for it. Yeah, we had like 6 contracts for each molecule or for each product.
And presumably on the shipping side, everything had to
Yes.
be temperature controlled and frozen
Yes.
in between locations. Wow.
Definitely, you needed frozen, refrigerated. Nevertheless, we had to hire what's called a broker to be present at where, customs that they have to replenish, say dry ice, for instance, and make sure temperature was not affected. Yeah, we shipped in, I now remember, frozen.
Yeah.
The product usually is in vials and is lyophilized. That's how a lot of the ADCs then, I don't know now, there must be improvement, but at that point, when we were outsourcing ADCs, yeah, we were in vials, lyophilized, and yeah, that made it even trickier to find a drug product facility because lyophilization is, to me, an art. And yeah, finding capable CDMOs that can do lyo is even harder.
I've never heard it described as an art before. Tell me about the art.
Lyophilization, yeah, I went through, I did in my graduate student days, my postdoc days, developing lyo formulations. I never told this to a lot of people, but it was a challenge because you need to have the right amount of your drug substance, your API, and the right amount of what you call a binder, to a filler. Because if you're just looking, especially with vaccines, right? Because you're now talking nanograms, micrograms, nanograms, that's like nothing. So you need to have a filler. Typically, we use manos, mannitol, so you can see the product.
Sure, excipient.
Yeah, the excipient. And when you have to figure out the crystallization temperature and freezing temperature, do you go where the protein of interest or the drug substance is stable? Of course you do. So it's an art. Let me put it that way.
Great. Looking for an integrated CDMO then, clearly, top of the list of priorities when it comes to selection parameters for choosing a contract manufacturer to work. What else would be on your list, Fi? What else do you look for?
The other thing, obviously, to me, quality is the highest, right? Quality. It's number one for anything. One of the things that we would do is check the different CMOs, CDMOs that we would like to work with and see how much, if they've had any sterility issues and any regulatory, inspections by different boards of health. Was it successful? They had a lot of 483s, for instance, and so on. And the one thing that I've, over the years in my outsourcing career, there seems to be a ratio that's critical between the quality, the number of quality folks and the scientists. So in my mind, 20 to 1 quality person's like the most that a CDMO can take. That's based on, it's not a real experiment, but just observing over the years.
So that's 20 scientists to 1 quality
person. Yeah. Anything over that, they're in trouble.
So that would be the max. What tends to be the best kind of ratio?
10, halfway there. Yeah. What I've found out is that the fewer quality folks there are, somehow that facility has more investigations, more failures, more investigations. It's like, and then it leads to turnover of people, of personnel faster. So, and what's important, and this I found with one CMO that we were looking at, that the head of quality cannot report to the head of manufacturing.
That's interesting.
Conflict of interest. Anyway, there was one CMO was like startup. I made a comment. I'm like, you can't report. How are you going to investigate your boss's work?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
We didn't go with that CMO, of course. Notice I keep on switching CMO, CDMO, because in the earlier days, we just called it CMO, right?
Sure.
Contract Manufacturing Organization. Nowadays, which is again a response, I guess, to some of the feedback that I've provided, is contract development and manufacturing organization. So they can do the early development as well as move forward to GMP manufacture. Now, I've heard of one that they call themselves CRDMO.
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
like a little bit over the contract research development. I'm like, okay, all good. But I mean, that's
Bit of a
perfect.
mouthful.
It's perfect for small biotech clients, but big pharma, we transfer processes that we have developed and optimized. Okay. We do not depend on a contractor to develop a process for us. So that's the difference.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about quality and the importance of that. What about project management when it comes to selecting a CDMO and the role that project management plays?
Yes. Project management has become a career now. And again, so over the 20 years in my outsourcing, the early days were a bench scientist would be assigned to be the project manager. And
Okay.
I can tell you, I used to be a bench scientist, right? My training is get the experiments done, never mind what the rest does. So very focused on yourself. A project manager cannot do that. You have to look at the entirety of the team and make sure that, the team works coherent, working unit. So there are project managers now, and that's another thing that I remember saying to some of the early CMOs that we worked with, like, can't you hire a project manager, dedicate the project manager, maybe one project manager to two clients or something like that? I mean, they're cheaper than a bench scientist, but they're inherently organized, right? That's the key. Organized, efficient. And to me, the project manager is the voice of my company to the CDMO. They represent us. They have to be responsible in ensuring that our timelines are met, budget, costs are met, and any potential issue that arises, the project manager notifies me. Let's say I was the contract manager for Pfizer for that particular project. I want to be informed as fast as possible if there's an issue that arises. Do not fix the issue among yourselves. I always tell CMOs that, because we can help, right? We're not going to be pointing fingers. We can help. It may be something that we found during our development of the process, right? That mistake. So just tell us.
Yeah. On that CMO selection process, is there anything else which you can do before you sign a contract and before you end up working with them to make sure that you're finding the right ones, make sure they're reliable, that they're going to hit their timelines? Are there any other sort of warning signs or things you can do to make sure that they're reliable?
Yeah, a quick one is just to find out the financial stability of that CMO, right? I mean, you don't want to work with a CMO that just filed for bankruptcy, for instance. I mean, those things you can find out beforehand, before you even go there. Another thing is really, okay, this is my experience during the pandemic, because we had to hire a new CDMO. By just looking at video of the facility, you have to go to the facility and check it out.
Yeah.
There are things that maybe it's my experience over the last 20 years that I go to a CDMO and find out I like to talk to the workers, the operators themselves, because the management is going to paint a nice picture, right? But if you talk to the operators and visit the facility, you can have a good sense. Is this genuine? You can have a good sense of the culture, so to speak. That is so important. Is my team going to be able to work with them? I mean, these are hard to measure, but with the experience I've had, I can say, yeah, we're gonna be in trouble with this one, or this one's perfect. We will work together. I've been in a situation wherein, okay, I go to a new CMO, the parking lot is empty. I'm like, what's going on? This is so strange, I mean, not empty, but I expect to have more cars. They send their employees home during an audit.
Wow. Okay.
So we like to do a technical evaluation and a quality audit, of course. Sometimes we're able to do it together. So the quality unit would just split off, do the audit, and then my team would go look at the technical capabilities and competency. This particular CMO was like very empty parking lot. I don't know what was going on. So when I brought it up, and I'm not afraid to ask questions in a conference room, I said, where are your employees? Oh, we sent them home for the day. I'm like, why? I needed to see in action. So that was strange.
Yeah. Did you end up working with them?
No, no. You get this gut feeling this is not going to work. And when they advertise their years of experience, okay, they're talking about the cumulative years of experience of each of the senior staff, senior personnel. I'm like, no, I want to know this particular person. How long has he been in this field or working in this field? So anyway, just little things, but
Yeah.
so we've had a failure, I remember, because we hired a CMO that we went with just virtual looking at the facility.
That was during COVID.
During COVID. I mean, you don't have a choice, right? They will not let you come, masked or everything.
Yeah.
Nope, you can't come. I understand, but this is going to be very difficult. We'll do video. Well, they only showed us the nice places, the nice clean places. What we didn't see was in the glassware area, there was a potential for cross-contamination. Dirty glassware coming in to be cleaned, clean glassware going out. Well, that's the perfect unidirectional flow. But not at that CMO. They had dirty and clean coming in, and the potential for cross-contamination was there. And my question to them later on was, how did you control that there was no mix-up by SOP? And I'm like, okay, SOP, as good as whatever. It's the operators are not going to be like thinking, oh, I should not go in there because it's not time for me to. That was a fail. That was bad.
And what are your thoughts on working with a geographically mixed selection of CMOs and CDMOs? Given the importance of face-to-face and site visits, would your preference usually be to go with a local or fairly local contract manufacturer? Where does that fit in?
If the expertise and is available within the US, we are very US centric. And really the reason for that is because our early clinical trials, phase 1, usually is held in the United States, right? So that gives you now, if you were manufacturing in Europe, you cannot import your, say, drug product until an IND has been approved.
Okay.
That's 30 days right there,
Mm.
loss, right, in time. So there are reasons, but then there was one particular project that we didn't have. I know US CMO that could do it. This was an oncolytic virus.
Mm.
We found somebody in the US, but this was the one that had potential cross-contamination in the glassware. And I'm like, okay, we're going to send it to Europe. So yeah, it's challenging, but we managed to get into the clinic and but they had a really outstanding project manager. So
Mm.
I'm like, lucky. I can, oh, yes. I think the project manager, so this was in Germany. And I shouldn't say this, but they're sticklers for time,
Mm-hmm.
very rigid, which is good, but it can be bad, but I'm not going to go there. But they typically are very rigid with time, and that is good. They don't give you a timeline that is like pulling strings. It's what they can do and
Mm.
based on their experience. So yeah, we preferred to stay in the US, and unless there was really no one capable, then we would outsource. Um, we actually did an experiment. It was a very costly experiment, and I think I was responsible for that cost, comparing a US CMO to India, an Indian CMO. A very simple monoclonal antibody project, right? Send them the same monoclonal antibody, and it was from uh, late process development to manufacturing. And what we found, I mean, the cost was 1/10 the
Wow.
cost in India.
Mm.
1/10. Because I guess because of labor costs. I
Sure.
mean, supplies will be the same, but labor's, and the US was able to get it done within the timelines that they promised us, and everything was hunky dory. Just the Indian CDMO was got it in time, but they had to put a lot more FTEs into the project. So
Mm.
very interesting. But in the end, they came out actually doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a lot more FTEs because they can afford to,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess, to put a lot more FTEs. But it was a little difficult.
A huge difference, isn't it? One tenth of the
Yeah, the
cost.
price.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know now. I think that was in 2010,
Mhm.
2011. It could be changed now. I don't know.
Moving seamlessly then from CDMO selection, I'd also like to talk about orchid selection because I know that
Mm,
that's something that you're very passionate about. I can see your rosettes and your certificates there in the background. Tell
yes.
us about orchids and what's the appeal?
Your listener is gonna be like, oh, gonna talk about
Confused.
orchids. Confused. What is she there for? Yeah, so orchids. My mom raised I'm originally from the Philippines, tropical country, very nice place for raising orchids, right? So my mom raised orchids, and I was about 4 or 5 when I realized they were orchids, but was not really interested in them. And then 40 years later, um, somebody gave me my first orchid in the United States. Some he bought it at the grocery
Mhm.
store. So this orchid was the genus Phalaenopsis, but that's it. No other identification. And it grew, it blossomed every year. And then just suddenly my interest in orchids just sprung.
Mm.
And in order to force myself in a way to learn more, I decided to apply to be a judge, a student judge with the American Orchid Society. So that was January 2022. Last June, I was elevated, they call it elevated, promoted to be a certified judge. So
Congratulations.
2.5 years. I'm like, and I've learned so much. So I went from one orchid to 10 to 40. Now I probably have around 350 orchids in my condominium.
Oh, wow.
Half of them are outdoors because it is very warm here in Atlanta, Georgia. So I have 2 huge terraces. They love the outdoors, just like being in the Philippines. So yeah, and my partner and I have won awards. You can see in the back. Those are just the rosettes. We've won what's called American Orchid Society Awards of Merit. And they're higher caliber, let me put it that way, awards.
Fantastic. When you're judging orchids, I presume, after the conversation we've just had, I assume you've probably got quite a rigorous process, do you? Quite a rigorous scorecard?
Very rigorous. We have a scorecard, and you look at form, color, and then other attributes like floriferousness. That means, is it a lot of flowers, right? If you expect that particular orchid to have a lot of flowers, does it have the same or more? So the form, judges like an orchid bloom to fill in a circle, and they have to be what's called zygomorphic, bilaterally symmetrical. Is it flat? Some orchids cannot be flat because their parents are not flat. So you have to know as an orchid judge that, okay, I don't expect you to be flat, but you look good. The form is nice, the color. Most judges like vivid colors, saturated colors, or color contrast between the sepals and petals and the lip.
Very interesting.
And we have a scorecard. And one of the talks I gave recently, I inserted the scorecard for orchids. And everybody was like, whoa, what's that? What's going on? So I just gave them a little story.
Great. Pi, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Luke. You have awesome questions. Thank you very much.
Over the past year, we've interviewed more than 100 experts in biopharma outsourcing, so we thought it would be useful to distill all those best practices into Outsourcing Fundamentals, an online training course that gives you and your team a foundation in successful outsourcing. Take this course for a comprehensive overview of the key trends shaping biopharma outsourcing. Over 4 hours, this course will give you 10 modules of expert insights and case studies including vendor selection, contract negotiation, quality oversight, tech transfers and more. Each module comes with helpful resources, interactive quizzes and a certificate of completion. Listeners to this podcast can get a full £100 off by using the code POD100, that's POD100, when you get to the checkout. To find out more, head to pharmasource.global/fundamentals.